God, I love The Nightmare Before Christmas. A fantastically spooky stop-motion musical that somehow intertwines the whimsy and wonder of Christmas with the morbid and macabre horrors of Halloween. It's home to several incredibly memorable songs that still take up permanent residence in my brain to this day. You guys might remember a little while back, around Christmas time a couple years ago, I did a big character arc video all about Jack Skellington, the movie's protagonist, and I figured, hey, since Halloween this year happens to fall exactly on my usual upload day of Tuesday, what better time to bring The Nightmare Before Christmas into the What If series? That's right, people, it's time to take 5 characters from The Nightmare Before Christmas. Well, sort of, but, you know, trust me, I'll explain it later, and give them teams of 4 Pokemon apiece, as I tell you what I think it'd be like if the Nightmare Before Christmas characters were Pokemon Trainers. And as always, if you've never watched The Nightmare Before Christmas before, big time heckin' spoilers ahead! Let's start things off with one of the movie's central characters, and the movie's deuteragonist, the one and only Sally. Voiced by Catherine O'Hara, Sally is a Frankenstein's monster-esque creation of Halloween Town's resident mad scientist, Dr. Finkelstein, but wants nothing more than to get out from under his thumb and live her own life. She has an incredible fondness for Jack Skellington, and relates quite a lot to Jack's feelings of feeling trapped in the life he currently lives. However, as much as she'd love to support Jack's efforts in putting on a great Christmas, she can't really shake the feeling that it's all going to go wrong for him, and even tries to stop him from taking off on the big night. Clever, compassionate, and kind, and with a talent for sewing, whether it be Jack's Santa Claus outfit or even her own limbs, Sally wants nothing more than for Jack to be happy, and maybe even for her to be happy with him. Let's start off Sally's Pokemon team with Type Null, an artificial Pokemon who, much like Sally, was created by science, and is constructed from the body parts of several other creatures stitched together. Also, Type Null's power-restricting mask could be a good reference to the fact that Sally spends a fair chunk of her screen time having to escape being held down and isolated by Dr. Finkelstein, just wanting to go out into the world and pursue life. Speaking of her efforts to dodge the Mad Doctor, let's give her a Vileplume next, whose Pokedex entries often mention how its petals contain a powerful poison, so potent that it could do things like immobilize you or cause severe allergic reactions, a great reference for how Sally often uses deadly Nightshade to put Dr. Finkelstein to sleep so that she can leave his lab. After that, we'll go with a Meowstic, a pretty simple aesthetic pick to represent the cat that Sally pets during her big solo number, Sally's Song, which may or may not actually be her pet. And lastly, Gardevoir, a psychic-type Pokemon that has precognitive abilities, perfect for how Sally often has visions of the future, much like the one that warned her that Jack's Christmas machinations were figuratively and literally gonna go up in flames. Yeah, I mean, that seems like a pretty useful ability, and surely a man of Jack's intelligence would take heed and maybe reel back on this whole Christmas thing and... Or not? Now let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about the primary villain of the film. You know, if you don't count Jack's own stubborn ambition as an antagonist. Oogie Boogie. Voiced by Ken Page, Oogie Boogie is a terrifying entity, lurking in his lair in Halloween Town, and always coming up with the next big scheme to make himself a holiday master of ceremonies. In fact, in the video game The Nightmare Before Christmas, The Pumpkin King, which actually serves as a prequel to the film, Oogie Boogie tries to do exactly that, wanting to dispose of Jack so that he could take over Halloween and turn it into a creepy holiday about bugs called Crawloween. And I have no doubt in my mind that if he had successfully done away with Santa Claus, he would have done the very same thing to Christmas. Bombastic, grandiose, grotesque, and horrifying to behold, Oogie Boogie is not the kind of person you want to cross, at least if you're not Jack Skellington, because the odds are definitely not in your favor to survive. especially because this boogeyman doesn't play fair. Let's start off Oogie Boogie's team with something of an aesthetic pick. Bayonet, a ghost-type Pokemon whose body and zipper-like mouth are reminiscent of the burlap sack body that Oogie Boogie has, and Mega Bayonet's body being covered with stitches and zippers that have several parts of its real body spewing out of it is kind of like how the litany of bugs that infest Oogie Boogie's body will regularly creep out of his mouth and crawl around on their own. After that, let's give him a Gengar, whose Pokedex entries often speak about how it loves to scare people on nights with a full moon by messing with their shadows, perfect for how Oogie Boogie describes himself during the film's opening number, This Is Halloween, as the shadow on the moon at night, filling your dreams to the brim with fright. Next up, a Scolipede, to represent how, after Jack returns to Halloween Town towards the end of the movie and kicks his ass, Oogie Boogie's body is torn away, and his real form is revealed to be a single centipede-like brain bug amongst hundreds of other insects. And lastly, Honchkrow, a Pokemon whose Pokedex entries often detail how it has a murder of Murkrow to do most of the heavy lifting for it, much like how Oogie Boogie himself has 3 little minions running around doing his dirty work. Not to mention Honchkrow having access to the ability Super Luck, which lets the user increase the critical hit ratio of its damaging moves and essentially make its own luck, is a great reference to how Oogie Boogie's lair is essentially one really morbid looking casino and how he describes himself as a gambling boogeyman, but far from one who plays fair. Just don't let this guy anywhere near the competitive Pokemon scene. You just know he'd be the douchebag running bright powder on everything and using Minimize whenever possible. Speaking of Oogie Boogie, I'm going to do something a little bit different this time around and focus on multiple characters in one slot, considering that these 3 basically function as a single character anyway. Oogie Boogie's 3 little minions, Lock, Shock, and Barrel. Voiced by Paul Rubens, Catherine O'Hara, and Danny Elfman, respectively, Lock, Shock, and Barrel are 3 mischievous little bastards who work for Oogie Boogie, and hence are occasionally referred to as Boogie's Boys, and are apparently Halloween's best trick-or-treaters, at least according to Jack. In fact, they're the ones that Jack actually employs to abscond with the so-called Sandy Claus in the midst of his Christmas takeover, and they do succeed in this. Although, not before accidentally making off with the Easter Bunny first. That's because, devious as they are, they're not exactly the brightest bulbs in the drawer, though of the 3 of them, Shock is clearly the most intelligent, and Barrel is, well, not, but they're at least smart enough to stay on the good side of the ever-intimidating Oogie Boogie and bring him sacrifices to eat, lest they likely wind up on his plate themselves. Now, since we're technically talking about 3 characters in a single slot here, I think it makes the most sense to pick one Pokemon to represent each of them individually, and I think I'll go with 3 Pokemon who are known to be tricksters or troublemakers to various degrees, which would all fit pretty well with a trio of mischievous trick-or-treaters. For the devilish Lock, we'll go with Impidimp, a Pokemon based on devils and imps whose Pokedex entries say it derives joy from playing pranks and feeding off the negative emotions from the targets of said pranks. For the witchy Shock, Misdreavus, whose Pokedex entries state that it finds immense joy in tricking and scaring others, and whose evolved form, Mismagius, is quite literally based on witches. And for the boneheaded Barrel, a Duskull, whose dex entries say that it loves to startle children and make them cry. And as for the 4th slot, I'm going to go with a Revavroom, just as something to kind of represent the walking bathtub that Lock, Shock, and Barrel uses as a vehicle between Halloween Town and the other holiday worlds. Now, full disclosure here, I did also consider Dodrio for this spot, considering that it has 3 individually sentient heads that squabble and bicker amongst themselves sometimes, much like Boogie's Boys also tend to do, but Revavroom was honestly just a more fitting pick aesthetically, and let's be honest, this trio probably would have a car that looked like a Revavroom given the option, so Revavroom as the 4th pick here was just more fun for me personally, so you're kind of just gonna have to make your peace with that. Of course, what video about The Nightmare Before Christmas would be complete without the man at the center of all this holiday chaos, jolly old Saint Nick himself, Santa Claus. Alright, look, he is technically a character in this movie, and, like, come on, when am I ever gonna have another chance to just make a Pokemon team for a holiday icon like this? Like, ever again? Voiced in this film by Ed Ivory, Santa Claus is basically what he is in most interpretations of him in holiday media. A jolly, rotund fellow with a deep, booming voice but a holly-jolly demeanor who looks to spread holiday cheer to all the nice kids around the world. Sadly, though, he is a victim of circumstance, as Jack just so happened to stumble ass backwards into his holiday world, and so got inspired to take over his holiday, leading to him being kidnapped by a bunch of weird kids in Halloween masks and being forced to endure the grandiose singing of a giant creepy bug man. And once Jack comes back to Halloween Town and frees Santa from Oogie Boogie's grasp, all Santa really wants to do is get back to his sleigh, deliver Christmas gifts as intended, and fix the damage that Jack caused with this whole fiasco. And speaking of Christmas presents, we're gonna get the most obvious pick out of the way right now. Yes, Santa Claus would in fact have a Delibird because, I mean, hey, it's literally based on him, right down to its tail being a sack like Santa's sack of toys, and its signature attack is called Present. There's no way I could not include Delibird. And much in that same vein, I definitely also need to give Santa Claus a Stantler to represent the reindeer that help pull Santa's sleigh through the sky as he delivers presents every Christmas Eve. Speaking of those presents, let's go with a Stuffle for this next slot. A Pokemon based on stuffed animals like teddy bears, even having a small bit of white fluff near its tail to represent the white tag that stuffed animals often have on them. And lastly, Crawdad, to represent Jack's wild misinterpretation of what he thought Santa looked like upon first seeing his shadow, with several characters assuming he was some big red lobster man, and actually calling him Sandy Claus up until they actually saw him and his relatively tiny hands. Jeez, I don't think I've seen somebody so disappointed by small hands since Jack Kelly from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And last, but definitely not least, it's the protagonist, Halloween's master of ceremonies, the Pumpkin King himself, Jack Skellington. Voiced by Chris Sarandon, with singing vocals provided by the film's composer, Danny Elfman, Jack is a living skeleton who resides in Halloween Town and the patron spirit of Halloween itself, leading the charge every year to make Halloween the spookiest and scariest it can be, much to the townspeople's frightening delight. However, by the time of the movie's events, Jack grows bored of the same old thing every single year and yearns for something new, something exciting. A yearning that takes him beyond the boundaries of Halloween Town and to a bright and colorful new land, Christmas Town, where he discovers the wonderment of Christmas. So enamored was Jack by all of this Yuletide delight that he believed this to be the missing element in his life, and he resolved to try and do his very own Christmas. To, we'll say mixed results. Grandiose, charismatic, and ambitious, if not more than a little impulsive, stubborn, and short-sighted, the real strength in Jack's character is in his willingness to recognize and correct his own mistakes, even if he had to nearly destroy himself and 2 entire holidays in order to get there, and Jack's journey of rediscovering the passion for the thing he loves, and realizing the love that he has for Sally, is truly one of my favorite character arcs of any movie protagonist. And what's a good movie protagonist without a faithful canine companion? So let's get a really obvious pick out of the way immediately by giving Jack a Greavard, a ghost-type dog Pokemon that's perfect to represent his beloved ghost dog, Zero. Next up, we'll go with a Alolan Marowak, largely an aesthetic pick to go with Jack being a living skeleton, and I went with the Alolan ghost-type version of Marowak here to be a bit more in line with Halloween and the rest of Jack's Pokemon. Plus, Alolan Marowak having Rockhead as its hidden ability could reference Jack's stubbornness in his Christmas endeavors, despite numerous warnings from Sally that it would end in disaster. After that, let's give him a Trevenant, another ghost type that fits well with the others on Jack's team, one that could represent the trees that house the doors to the other holiday worlds, and also a Pokemon known to seek revenge on those who hurt the forest and those who live there, a solid callback to Jack kicking Oogie Boogie's ass once he found out what he was trying to do with Sally and Santa. And lastly, there is no way to make a Pokemon team for the Pumpkin King of Halloween Town without a Gourgeist, a ghost-type Pokemon based on jack-o'-lanterns, one of the most well-known pieces of Halloween iconography. Also, Gourgeist's signature move, Trick or Treat, which makes the target become part ghost-type, is perfect for a character like Jack, who wanted to hijack Christmas because he thought he'd do a better job, only to inadvertently just sort of make it Halloween, but in December. Hopefully next time Jack gets an urge like this, he'll try to do away with a completely useless holiday that nobody would actually miss. Personally, I vote for Columbus Day. But what about you? What Pokemon do you think these Nightmare Before Christmas characters would have on their teams? And just for fun, if you celebrate Halloween, what did you go as this year? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a like if you liked it, subscribe for more spooky, scary videos like this in the future, share this on your favorite social medias, and ring that sleigh bell so you always get notified when I upload. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, friendos.